Today, I want to talk a little bit about the principles of design and the elements of art. And this really isn't discussed in your book too much, but I think will help you in your artwork analysis that you have throughout the semester. And the principles of design are basically some basically elements that each artist used to create the design or the composition of their artwork. Unity and variety is the first principle of design. And basically unity is sort of anything that brings the whole artwork together, okay? Whether it be a pattern that is sprinkled throughout the composition, or a color maybe, where we have a bright red in sort of 3 or 4 places that sort of brings unity to the whole composition, okay? So, or it could be a bold line that sort of weaves in and out of the composition, okay? But anything that brings sort of unity to the whole composition. And then of course the opposite of that is variety. Even though we have unity in an artwork, we also have to have a sense of variety. So maybe the pattern that's creating unity is seen throughout the work, but it changes just a little bit, maybe in color, maybe in line, maybe in the hue, how intense of a color it is. But there is that sort of variety that changes and gives interest to the artwork. So you have to have both unity and variety in a design. You also have to have balance in an artwork. Artwork can be balanced sort of in 2 ways. It can be very symmetrical, where basically it is the same on either side, and you can fold it in half and you'll have the same thing on either side. Or it can be asymmetrically balanced, meaning that visually it still weighs the same on each work, but it's not exactly the same on the right side as well as the left, or on the top as well as the bottom, okay? So there has to be balance. There also has to be another principle of design is emphasis and subordination, okay? Emphasis is just that. There has to be some sort of area that catches your eye, that is the emphasis of the artwork, whether that be a person, okay, or some sort of story that the artist has decided to capture, okay? There has to be some sort of emphasis. And then along with that in the artwork, there also has to be areas of what we call subordination, areas that don't really have anything. Sometimes the background would be something that is sort of subordinate to the emphasis of the artwork. Okay, so we have to have areas that are of interest and areas that are not, and these are called emphasis and subordination. Okay, so these are some things that you might want to talk about when analyzing your artwork. A principle of design is scale and proportion. Scale has to do, is it the same size as it relatively is in our environment, in the real world? Okay, that's scale. Proportion is when we're talking about the relationship, the size relationship to parts of the whole. So for instance, if we have a human figure and the head is extremely larger than the body, then that's out of proportion, okay? And so we can talk about those things as principles of design, scale and proportion. Rhythm is also another principle of design, and that has to do with, it kind of goes along with unity in that it is based on repetition, okay? So that means there's something in the work that's sort of repeating itself, that's sort of bringing the artwork in. There's my cell phone ringing, but I'm not going to stop at this point, okay? Elements of art. Elements of art are also things that we can discuss in our artwork analysis. Our first example that's really easy is line, right? Line is basically a path that's traced by a moving point, okay? And line will move our eye around the composition. So if you're sort of stuck, look at line. What kind of lines do we have? Now this can actually be a physical line, like we think of when we think of line, but it can also be a maybe the line of the back of a chair, as you see here behind me. If I was painting that, it could be the line of somebody's arm. Okay? So it doesn't necessarily physically mean a line like we think of that you would draw with a pencil. Okay? It could be the way a person's arm moves, or the way a landscape rolls across the back of a landscape. Okay? Shape and mass. Shape is two-dimensional, so what is the shape of the object that you're analyzing? And mass is three-dimensional, so we would talk about that in sculpture and architecture. Okay? It's actually the volume of space. So that's something else that we want to talk about. Light and value. Value is shades of light and dark, but is one area darker than the other? Is there an area that's highlighted? Okay, those are things that affect how we look at art. Color. Color moves our eye around the composition. Okay, so this is an element of art. And it's rather easy one usually to point out because we're all sort of drawn to color. Okay, it also gives us emotional effects. So a red might be very passionate, where a blue or a green might calm us. So color also affects how we look at an artwork. Okay, so that's something else that we want to take a look at when we're analyzing our artworks. Texture and pattern. Texture can be actual, or it can be where we physically can touch it and feel it, or it can be sort of imagined in that it's how it's designed. Okay, pattern is usually decorative, and these give variety to an artwork, as I talked about in one of our principles of design. And there's my son as well, so you have to excuse these interruptions. Space is another visual element. Okay, it can be 3D, meaning it can physically be an area, or it can be implied space. Okay, we can talk about linear perspective. Okay, which is where we have sort of all points meet one point, one vanishing point, and this begins in the Renaissance, and we continue to see it up until now. So we don't really have linear perspective until the Renaissance. Before the Renaissance, we have atmospheric perspective. That's where objects closer to us are in more detail, and farther away become hazy. Okay, so that was atmospheric perspective and how we show space. And then intuitive. During the Roman period, we'll see that they're trying to sort of figure out linear perspective, and that they're placing things where they think they might be, where they look appropriate. They're using their intuition to create depth and space. Okay, and then time and motion. Is there motion? Is there artwork? Is there movement in the artwork? And so these are all things that we can think about when we're analyzing an artwork. And so I've made this is a little bit long, but I wanted to get these in, because these are the things that you want to write about and you want to talk about in your blog and in your artwork analysis. Okay, and then eventually in your test. So this is our short lesson this week.